Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining in with us virtually for the 2021 Undergraduate Research Awards recognition event. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the lands and people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. Our university campus is situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, which includes Algonquin, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. Now, because everyone is tuning in with us remotely across a variety of cities, I'd like to encourage everyone to take a moment to acknowledge the land that they are on. As a university community, we are dedicated to continuing to increase our awareness, understanding, and gratitude for the lands we share. So now for introductions. My name is Kate Gambier, and I'm the coordinator of this Undergraduate Research Awards program for the Office of Research Services at Ontario Tech. We have an exciting event planned for you this afternoon, and I encourage you all to share photos and tag OT VP Research in your post from today on social media. A few housekeeping items. Captions are enabled. To switch them on, click on the CC closed caption on the bottom panel of your screen. For the best view of our speakers, we recommend that you change your view on Zoom in the top right corner, hope that's right for you, to be in the speaker view. We encourage everyone to have their cameras on for this virtual event, just like you would be if we were celebrating in person. Please feel free to use the virtual round of applause or the fireworks to congratulate our URA recipients throughout. You can find these at the bottom of your screen under the reactions button. And if you have any questions throughout, let us know in the chat. We will be monitoring that. So back to our regularly scheduled program for today. This event here gives us the opportunity to celebrate our exceptional students and promote the importance of undergraduate research at our university. I'd like to welcome our special guests in attendance today, including staff members from the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation, and the Office of Research Services, faculty members, project supervisors, and of course, our Undergraduate Research Award recipients. The 2021 URA competition was incredibly strong, and there were many deserving applicants from across all faculties. So congratulations to every one of you on receiving an award. Today is a celebration of your contributions to research and your educational journey. Your work over these past few months has made a huge contribution to research at Ontario Tech University, and your efforts are inspirational to the entire university community. I'd now like to call on Jennifer Freeman, Executive Director, Office of Research Services, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you today virtually, so welcome. As Caitlin mentioned, my name is Jennifer Freeman, and I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Research Services. And I am so pleased to welcome you to today's celebration of the Undergraduate Research Awards program at Ontario Tech University. This is the first time we've done it virtually, so we're excited to have this event go on today. Well over 10 years ago, the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation, through the Office of Research Services, expanded the Undergraduate Research Awards program at Ontario Tech. While the program itself has evolved over the years, the aim remains steadfast: to offer our undergraduate students the opportunity to gain hands-on practical research experience in their field of study through the interaction with leading researchers at Ontario Tech University. We take great pride in the great responsibility in providing opportunities for our students, including all of our Undergraduate Research Award recipients here today, with the skills and critical knowledge necessary to meet the needs of the workforce, enabling them to become the next generation of innovative leaders. Undergraduate research is a key piece of our research enterprise and experiential learning at Ontario Tech. And just to give you a sense, the university is close to $20 million annually in research funding, and a large part of this is to the highly qualified individuals, including undergraduate students, who help our faculties conduct the research that they do that leads in many areas across many sectors, and helps to enable innovation and commercialization and profound research results. Today, we are here to celebrate each of our talented and deserving Undergraduate Research Award recipients. The Undergraduate Research Awards are funded by either the Natural Sciences of Engineering Research Council of Canada, Undergraduate Student Research Awards, or otherwise known as NSERC USRA, or the Ontario Tech University Student Training Assistantship in Research Program, the STAR Award. This is funded through our office in the Vice President Research Innovation. These awards are supported by project supervisors, talented faculty members from across the university who conduct leading edge research and provide opportunities for undergraduate students to apply their academic learning. We thank each of our faculty member supervisors for their participation in the program for 2021 and their continued support to undergraduate research at Ontario Tech. And as we all know, through COVID, we've had to be creative with trying to find ways to support activities remotely. And so I think for a second year, we've done well to be able to do this. Some are conducting research on campus, but it's been a very flexible and adaptable program. And I also commend you as students who are working your way through this on your efforts in this regard. This year, we had 179 applicants, which is one of our highest years. And through the vigorous awards program and process, we were able to award 37 award recipients. So congratulations to those who were awarded. And this represents activities from across all 7 of our faculties, which is exceptional. We hope that this opportunity has encouraged you to further develop your research abilities and inspire you for future careers. Please join me in a round of applause virtually for our 2021 Undergraduate Research Award recipients. So I give you a round of applause. So congratulations, well done. So now I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker today. I'm very pleased to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Andrea Kirkwood. Dr. Kirkwood is an associate professor and the undergraduate program director for biology science within the Faculty of Science. Dr. Kirkwood focuses her research interests in the area of environmental biology. She has critical expertise in such areas as water quality, urban ecology, environmental microbiology, invasive species, algae, and aquatic ecosystems, to name a few. Dr. Kirkwood completed a joint honors degree in environment and resources studies and biology at the University of Waterloo, a master's degree in aquatic ecology at McMaster University, and a doctoral degree in environmental microbiology at the University of Toronto. Dr. Kirkwood conducted her postdoc studies at Oklahoma State University and the University of Calgary prior to joining the Faculty of Science at Ontario Tech. Dr. Kirkwood teaches courses at Ontario Tech in ecology, conservation biology, environmental research methods, and aquatic ecology. Dr. Kirkwood is committed to community-based environmental stewardship initiatives. She oversees the Kirkwood Lab at Ontario Tech that conducts aquatic ecology research in a variety of systems, including ponds, wetlands, lakes, rivers, and even wastewater systems. An interesting fact, Dr. Kirkwood is the lead researcher on a COVID-19 wastewater assessment program, which has been implemented across the region. Dr. Kirkwood and the outstanding COVID-19 wastewater team has addressed the challenges of COVID-19 in an inspirational and innovative way. Thank you, Dr. Kirkwood, for being here today and spending time with us, and for your continued commitment to research that is so valuable to us all. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrea Kirkwood.
Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. And in fact, I think you've preempted my talk. So I'm just going to share my slides. So just give me one moment. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? I can't see my Zoom. Oh, good. I see a nod by Caitlin, so that's good. I've got the 2 screens going, so it always pops up and surprises me sometimes. So I was asked to be this year's speaker, and I was asked to maybe just talk more about what it's like being a professor, my research program, anything. It was really wide open, but I thought this may be an opportunity for NSERC USER students to get some insight into what it is, how you become a professor. I think most often when they're taking, when you're taking your undergraduate courses, you don't really, you have some insight into what your professor does, but I know when I was an undergrad, I had no idea. I just thought my professor taught. I had no idea that they did research and so forth. So I see like probably more than half of the attendees today are professors themselves. So I'm going to hopefully not talk too long. And I really would like to encourage a Q&A session, because if you have any questions about what it's, how to become a professor, the challenges, anything like that, as a career goal, you've got many people, not just me, here to to give you at least their own perspective. Now, speaking of perspectives, this is my perspective. This is my story. And the reason why I've really kind of designed my talk from my own narrative, my own perspective, is because there's more than one journey or type of journey or roadmap, whatever you want to call it, to become a professor. And certainly my roadmap is very different from my, really good friends and colleagues that I've known through the years. So just keep that in mind. But I'm hoping what it will do is it will dispel that there's a recipe for becoming a professor, because there really isn't. And so without further ado, I'm going to continue on here and hope we can have a really robust discussion at the end of it. So Confucius is famous. He's a famous philosopher from China, probably thousands of years ago, more than hundreds of years ago. But, I wanted to post this because sometimes you see on social media people post inspirational quotes. And this is a common one that we see, that, it's very positive, that just because the circumstances are not allowing you to achieve your goals, well, then you just adjust the actions rather than the goals. And so I'm here to say that that's great, but don't let this stop you from perhaps changing your path and changing your goals. That's okay too. I'm definitely someone, it may look like I had a linear path, but I think it's important to know that every step you make on your learning journey as a student, and then potentially a researcher, if that's the direction you want to go, is that there's never any wasted learning. Okay. And so adjusting the actions, certainly you can adjust your actions, but I also want to say that part of this is addressing roadblocks. And, there was probably many of you have heard this phrase, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Well, part of that is this acknowledgement that some people have, more privilege or doors open to them to pursue their goals than others. And so I would say that if you are in what we call an equity deserving group, that doesn't have a lot of representation in science, or as, in kind of the higher levels of STEM fields, then certainly the actions aren't just yours, but they're the actions of institutions, of people in power or privilege to act to help you achieve your goals. So that's kind of my kind of add-on to this kind of optimistic quote from Confucius. So on Twitter, probably a year or two ago, there was someone asked the question, it was quite funny actually, to post their on-brand photo from childhood that basically gives some insight into what they became. So if it was someone in front of a computer playing a video game, and then they became a coder or computer scientist, and then it made sense. And so I certainly had some on-brand photos. Now I'm sure I have some because, I'm old enough to all of my childhood photos are not digital, but I was able to kind of dig up one that may not be easy to see. But there I am. I think I'm about 5 or maybe 6 sitting on this rock up in Halliburton at the family cottage. And my mom was into black and white photography. It's not that old, it's in the 70s, but she was into black and white photography at the time. And so, but it really speaks to this, we didn't have a TV. Back in those days, when you had a cottage, it was pretty, bare bones. You spent most of your time outside. There wasn't, on rainy days, you played cards and board games, that sort of thing. And so I had lots of time to really be aware. I was always a curious child. And So honestly, I really can't say that my experience and curiosity, at the cottage, I realize that not everyone is privileged enough to have that background. But certainly I grew up in Toronto as well. And I would say my experiences in, the ravine system and having my schools and our educational programs connected to that really connected me to nature. So that, again, this is my story. And so that just gives you some insight. So I want you to think about if you have an on-brand photo from your childhood. And if you don't, that's okay too. If anything, it's just self-reflection of where you've been and where you've come and where you plan to go. So as Jen already kind of mentioned my kind of educational background, I just wanted to go through it quickly just to let you know, okay, well, to become a professor, you usually have to have your undergraduate degree, which then is a springboard into getting to graduate school. And so I did go to Waterloo, very broad, general kind of, at the time, this is again dating me, but there wasn't an environmental science program yet at Waterloo. So I managed to kind of get my science by doing a double major with biology. But in fact, I'm really happy I did the environmental studies with biology because I got a nice kind of full-fledged background in social sciences as well as the sciences. But again, I really was interested in freshwater and ecology. And so I went to McMaster to study phytoplankton communities and mercury bioaccumulation in lakes in Muskoka. And then finally, I did a real hard turn, stayed with the kind of algae theme, focusing on cyanobacteria at University of Toronto, but really shifting from a pristine system to wastewater treatment systems. And so right there, this is not a usual path. I'll tell you right now, most students will, like if they start in a program, say ecology, they tend to stick, not all of them, but they tend to kind of stick on a linear path. I did take a bit of a hard right when I went into environmental microbiology. But again, there was method to my madness. I was very interested in contaminants at the time and bioremediation, just how kind of native or natural microorganisms that exist in the system, how they can help to break down contaminants from pulp and paper effluent. And so what do you do after you get your PhD? Well, there's many different opportunities to go into industry, government, consulting, jobs that require expertise. And a PhD is really just, it reflects expertise in a particular discipline. But I, at the time, because I could, I was able to move to Oklahoma and start my first postdoctoral fellow. So it's basically like being an apprentice. It's like, once you get your education over with, then you have some time, an opportunity to actually work as a scientist. And so I equate it to being basically an apprentice. You're still learning the ropes, but you had a lot more independence as well. And so at this point, I spent a few years in Oklahoma, then I went to the University of Calgary. And so I worked in salt water systems and then or hypersaline systems, rivers in the Rocky Mountains, and then finally landing a job at what used to be UOIT, now it's Ontario Tech, and running a lab and starting up a lab in freshwater ecology research. But, what is that? So those are all kind of the chronological order of, degrees and experiences. But there's also this notion of my brand, and some people may cringe at this, but this, when I've as a mentor, I'm trying to learn what the lingo is for helping students in careers, because not the vast majority of students are not pursuing to become an academic or a professor at a university. And that's great because we need people with expertise in, say, my field, freshwater ecology, to work in all the different sectors and bring that expertise and science and knowledge to develop policy for research outside of academia. That's all important as well. And so this is known as, building your own personal brand. And so I kind of went through the exercise that students usually are told to go through is just when you're trying to sell yourself to an employer, how do you kind of sell yourself with respect to kind of your background and skills that you've acquired and what makes you kind of unique as well. And so, of course, I think environmental biology really was my focus in undergrad. And then I became, went from general to more focused on aquatic ecology and contaminants. And then even more further focused on my PhD, which is very common. And perhaps you're working in labs with PhD students, you may realize that they're actually working on very specific topics for their PhD. And so after my PhD, and I did want to see if I could pursue becoming a professor, because it was a time in my life when I was free to be able to move anywhere, because it's true that the opportunities become fewer and fewer the more degrees you get, because you do become what they call kind of overqualified in some respects. And I was told that when I was even considering career path outside of being a professor, is that I really wanted to build my skills. And so for those of you who are thinking of going on to do, graduate school and a PhD, it's not possible to get all the skills, because I just told you just get more specialized. And so doing a postdoc is, or at least something equivalent to doing some sort of job that allows you to acquire different skills that you didn't have exposure to in your grad studies. That's what I did at Oklahoma State. I did molecular studies. At the time it was cloning and sequencing to study microbial communities. And then I had an opportunity to move back to Canada at University of Calgary to study a whole new system, new research questions, even getting into more theoretical ecology in the rivers up there. And then finally, ending with my brand, this is my lab. And so the Kirkwood Lab at Ontario Tech is diverse. I would say, yes, we're probably more generalists than specialists, but certainly that has proven to be kind of a good fit and a good model for the students that have come through my lab and myself, and in acquiring funding and so forth. So that's just kind of my path. So again, hoping that you're seeing kind of my journey, and thinking about, as you are now maybe going into fourth year or you're graduated, and you're just completing your NSERC USTRA, your summer job, then how can you start thinking about your career goals and so forth. Now, of course, I don't want it to seem like, everything just happened just so, no issues along the way. And of course, there's lots of challenges, and I'm not going to, go into all of them. But I think it's important to kind of make the point that when I did my PhD, it wasn't easy. I found that working in a system where no one had looked at the organisms I was focusing on at all in these wastewater treatment systems, that some of the research objectives were dead ends, and they still provided interesting information, but not to the point of really being publishable other than my thesis. And so I would say for my PhD, for parts of it, I definitely felt like I was treading water, and I want to normalize that. I think going into grad studies, whether it's your master's or your PhD, just because things aren't working out or you find that you're struggling a little bit, that's totally normal. It's totally okay. The main thing is, though, is that you have a support system in place with your supervisor, with your peers in your lab, as well as the resources that are offered on campus as well, to that this is normal, but you shouldn't have to do it alone or deal with it alone. And then as I was kind of moving into the realm of applying for jobs, and you probably picked up, I'm not a hyper specialist. I am definitely more of a generalist. That I was really more of a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. And so I did get feedback from some universities that I'd interviewed for, that they didn't quite know how to pigeonhole me. Also, too, a lot of my background was in more of kind of applied as opposed to fundamental, which is kind of curiosity, open-ended research. And so I kind of struggled with this, but interestingly enough, after I'd become a professor, and this very issue came up as a question on Twitter, and I'd encourage you, if you're interested in science and staying in science and just learning about how scientists work, like there's lots of discussions amongst scientists, whether they're professors or work for the government or industry or what have you. It really provides a lot of insight into how science works, and providing a lot of discussion there. But this was one of the discussions, and from it stemmed a blog post that I was invited to write for Small Pond Science, which is a fairly popular blog, but in kind of the Twittersphere and ecology circles. But it was really kind of well received because some people struggle with, well, are you more competitive for a job if you become a specialist or a generalist? And so I touched on both the pros and cons of being a jack of all trades. And but at the end of the day, it worked out for me because when I started my position, there was a lot of, in 2008, 2009, there was a lot like that. Basically, the world was economy was collapsing. And so there were a lot of, cutbacks and lines of funding for research were being kind of tightened and so forth. And so fortunately, because I did have a broad background, I was able to acquire funding because I had that expertise. And so that's where I'd argue, if you want to keep your lab running, then having the ability to, maybe it's not your dream research project, but if it helps keep the lights on the lab, so to speak, then it helps certainly. But again, my experience, I'm certain, depending on what your opportunities are, that may not really be necessary. Okay, so now the research that we do in my lab is already touched on. So I did this actually a few years ago, so maybe it's changed a little bit, but you see algae is very prominent because, of course, there, in my lab group, pretty much all students their work will touch on studying algae of some sort, whether it's phytoplankton or periphyton or macroalgae. And then, but of course, there's all of these other types of studies that have happened. This is just based on words on my website from a few years ago. And so I just wanted to kind of go over, the scales of research that we do in my lab, because really the types of research questions that we have aren't really committed to a certain scale. I think in some labs, actually a lot of labs at Ontario Tech, it's what's in the beaker or the petri dish, and it's even at the molecular level of genes and understanding proteomes and metabolomes, etc. And that's just for biology. For chemistry, it's we're getting down maybe even to atoms. But really the smallest scale that we work with is the actual organism, but understanding in many instances we will use molecular techniques to understand certain functions of these organisms, but then scaling up to communities, bacterial communities in wetlands we've looked at, algal communities, whether they're phytoplankton, floating algae in lakes, or the attached algae periphyton in rivers. Invertebrates such as zooplankton, or the big juicy fish food known as macroinvertebrates that live in lakes and rivers and wetlands, and also aquatic plants. But technically speaking, what's mostly in here, although there are aquatic plants in the mess here, is a macroalga known as Nitolopsis obtusa. One of my PhD students successfully defended his PhD earlier this week, and that was his focal organism was, and it's an invasive non-native species known as starry stonewort. So the types of ecosystems, we like anything that's wet. And so we will study whether it's stormwater ponds, which I'm sure if you live in Durham region, you see them all over the place. And so you think of cumulatively these aquatic ecosystems, which really are designed for flood control, but are colonized by aquatic organisms. In our lab, we want to know, well, what are the organisms doing? How are they influenced by the water that's draining into these ponds? And how do they mitigate the water that exits the ponds into receiving waters? And then finally, across landscapes, because in order to understand what's happening in communities and ecosystems, it's important to also know how they're connected on the landscape and how different, land cover and land uses like urbanization or agricultural land use, or even natural, where forests and wetlands are, remained intact, how they influence what's happening in aquatic ecosystems. Because of course, you can learn a lot about what's happening in a lake, for example, by what's also happening on the landscape, because the water that hits the land eventually drains in to the lake or river. Okay, so just wanted to end things up here because I think I get this question a lot, and this is maybe an opportunity to inspire more questions. But, what is it like being a professor? Well, I'll tell you, it's changed And I think there's a few people who are sitting here who probably can agree with me that it certainly has evolved over the last, say, 30, 40, 50 years even. I think maybe in the 1960s, you think of a white guy with a pipe. It would just be sitting pondering at his desk, looking out the window, which sounds so lovely, just to be able to think. And I'm sure I can hear the chuckles right now of people who are other professors that are listening and pining for that as well. So what's happened is just it's diversified and changed. I think there's a lot of good things that have changed, but of course, professors wear many hats. And yes, we teach courses, we run research labs and mentor students. We also have to be accountants because we have to manage our budgets and so forth. And so I have workload here is, some weeks I got a lot of marking and I have to keep up with what's happening in my lab, and it can be some longer hours, but then there's flexibility. You've got these ebbs and flows. And so I love that I can control my schedule somewhat, so I can attend my mid-afternoon kindergartners play or something along those lines. That's happened in the past. So I would say that it's really a matter of balance and becoming adept at managing the workload. And I think that's all I'll say about that. That there's definitely pros and cons. Infrastructure, from my own personal experience, I did have some issues. I didn't have a lab when I first joined. I had to share bench tops and all that. But over time, with support from both the university and my colleagues, I was able to end up with my own lab. But it lets you, what I have here is that sometimes, equipment breaks, you don't have the space you need or what have you. And you just have to be very adaptable, I think. I think it's just, again, it's probably like this. I think just in general, the overall kind of go to, means of survival in any type of work sector is being adaptable. And that's true for being a professor as well. And then the whole work-life balance. Obviously, I'm a woman, I'm cisgendered woman who has young children. My son just turned 12 and I have a 7-year-old. But, of course I had kids while being a professor, and certainly that's difficult, but it's difficult, I think, with all, with both parents are working. But I think it's important for me to try to be as transparent as possible. That can be a challenge, but again, my advice would be to ensure that you have support both at work and at home. And I'd say now that it's not just, it's still somewhat gendered towards women having to deal with this balance, but I would argue, because I'm seeing it more and more, that it's true for the fathers in a relationship that have to, you've seen this especially during the pandemic. So I think it's just important. I've kind of just brought them up as talking points. Again, it's just my experience, but I think as long as you know what you're kind of walking into, then it's a lot more manageable than being kind of surprised that these become major problems for you in your career. Okay, so several years ago, I was asked to talk about the whole work-life balance as a woman in science. And really just to end off here, the moral of my story was I found that being prepared, gaining skills, kind of learning the ropes were important to be available for opportunities. But again, this is just when I'm talking about opportunity here, it's a little bit loaded, because it's not just about luck, but again, it's about getting back to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think it's important for people to recognize that not everyone has the same opportunities. And so I know in my lab, I've tried to really address this and make sure that all students have access and have opportunities, networks, connections that may not be obvious to, especially first generation students, where they don't have parents that are professionals or have, are professors, that sort of thing. So that's really what I mean by opportunity, making sure that, it's not just up to you, but up to others around you, your mentors and support network, to help with that as well. Okay, final point. I know it's a little bit cheesy, but it's so true. The journey is just as important as the destination. I had a lot of fun along the way. I learned a lot. I think I am a lifelong learner, and that's why I titled my talk as a professional lifelong learner. And I would say that, continue, keeping that kind of flame alive for learning is what's really going to help you, whatever job you end up with. Okay, so thanks for listening. It's question time. I'm happy to entertain any questions, and I encourage any other professors in the audience to pipe up with their experience as well, because mine's very personal to me.
So thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Raise a hand if you want to ask your question directly, and feel free to unmute yourself once we call on you. I also will read out a few from the chat here. The first one I see here is from Emmanuel. It's what obstacles were in place with regard to the US degree recognition?
Okay, so just to clarify, I did a postdoc at Oklahoma State. So that wasn't a degree, it was just basically a job where I was like a research associate, and I worked on research projects. But as far as I know, unless you want to go to professional school, so that may be different. So medical schools and dentistry, all that, I can't really speak to. But overall, there really shouldn't be any difference between, as long as it's an accredited school from the States, it should be recognized in Canada.
Okay, perfect. And if anyone else has any other questions, let us know or raise a hand and we'll call on you as well. Next up, on your website, and obviously through your discussion as well, you recognize the land and people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation and the Curve Lake First Nation, as these lands are where you often perform your research, working closely with the lands, the waters, and alongside Indigenous people. We also know that you are an advocate of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So do you have any recommendations for our researchers on how they can engage meaningfully and respectfully with Indigenous peoples, or other ways that we can all actively work to decolonize our research?
Yes, so I would say that I'm still very much in the beginning of my journey, but it started several years ago. I have great gratitude for just at our own institution, Jill Thompson, for example, she's our, I forget the full name of her title, but she's the manager of the Indigenous Cultural Services Center at Ontario Tech. And, through the workshops that she offered, everything from just learning about First Contact, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, reading the call to action. And if you don't have time for the full treatise of the truth and the report, I think the calls to action are really enlightening. And I think even just targeting some of those related to education are really important, because I think training is kind of wrapped up in that as well. I know for myself, my research obviously lends itself to partnering with Indigenous communities in our area, including Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation and Curve Lake First Nation. I have contacts with both, and so far it's just really been kind of, doing water quality monitoring for them and providing data for them. But I'm hoping that in kind of the next phase, working with, people from these communities that really can help me work with them to define what our research goals will be. But I think it does take some sensitivity. And before you even broach those discussions, I think it's really important to do the work, to learn about what colonization has done to Indigenous communities, a lot of the myths, and as well as a lot of the residential school system and how it really was integral to very much destroying a culture and Indigenous communities across Canada and North America. So I think that's a good place to start. And it's not really about, like, honestly, it can get you down if you think about it too much. And, but I think it's important work that needs to be done in order for the reconciliation part to really work, and for showing that you're coming from a good place, or as they would say, in a good way, you're coming from that perspective, and always being open to learning, and being mindful of their perspective.
Thank you. We have another one in the chat here. What was the amount of time required to complete your graduate professional degrees? Was the amount of time ever intimidating to you when you were a younger student, i.e. 8+ years of age?
Sorry, that's my question. I can clarify what I'm asking.
For sure.
No, sorry, I meant to ask, when you were maybe in high school or your undergraduate studies, was the idea of embarking on a career journey that would take maybe 8 or more years to kind of get to somewhere where you could call that your career ever intimidating to you? Sorry, 8+ years being the amount of time, not the age.
Right. No, that's a really good question. And I totally forgot about including that context. I did not plan to be a scientist or a professor from an early age at all. In fact, I remember it's interestingly enough, I think it was about 8 years old when my mother just said out of the blue, from memory anyway, "Oh, you're going to be a scientist one day." And I said, "No, I'm not," because I thought of scientist was Einstein. I already had this, I don't know if you've heard of imposter syndrome, but I just assumed, I get good grades, but I'm not a scientist. Like, I just thought of scientists being way outside of my realm of understanding and abilities. And it really wasn't until I started my master's when it clicked. I literally started doing field work and research, and everything coalesced, and I realized, oh, this is what I love to do. So it took me a long time. So to answer your question, I did my master's, and I just thought, at the time I was finishing my master's, I had friends who were PhD students finishing up, and it was in the mid to late 90s when just the economic outlook in Canada, there was just a lot of cutbacks. NSERC postdocs were slashed. I had a lot of friends leaving Canada to go to the US. It was part of this brain drain that happened. So it really wasn't a great time to be considering doing a PhD, I'll tell you that. And so that's why when, there's discussions, fast forward to present day, where, millennials and so forth think that they're dealing with this for the first time. It's like, no, this is absolutely cyclical. I remember thinking that, it's getting a PhD is a life goal of mine. And I was privileged enough to be able to do it at the time. At that point in my life, I was single and had no real family responsibilities or obligations. So again, my personal journey, I was able to do it. I was even prepared to be a Walmart greeter after. That was always the joke, because we just knew that there was no jobs in Canada at the time I was starting. And so maybe that was my coping mechanism, but I think it's just the drive for learning. I just love to learn, and I'm always curious. And so that's why I pursued it. I know that's not the motivation for a lot of other people. But for me, I guess I wasn't really thinking about, so by the time I finished my master's, a PhD at that point was only another 4 or 5 years, right? So it didn't seem that onerous at that point.
Thank you. I believe Lonji has a question.
Yes, thank you. And what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that, Professor Kirkwood. I just want to echo, as a professor myself, that I never planned to end up as a university professor. And it would be a daunting kind of journey to, start that up front and think that will be my only sort of career outcome, but a lot of people get into academia via different routes. So my question to you is, did you have a mentor from sort of high school age onward that was sort of encouraging you to continue on with the university degrees, because you have quite a remarkable path of, going from Waterloo to Toronto to McMaster, or, so sometimes you just need reassurance that, yeah, I'm on the right path and these decisions are good. But did you have a sort of a constant mentor throughout that period of time where those big decisions were being made?
You know, I wish I could say I did. I'd have to say so I didn't have a particular mentor. I think that's why it really wasn't until my master's when I even thought about academia as a career path, because I knew no one. I did co-op at Waterloo. And in fact, I would actually say it was probably the different mentors I had through co-op that made me realize, oh, well, if I want to get kind of higher up in these environmental, like these organizations, whether it's government or industry, because I work for both, I need to get my master's. That's what drove me to do my master's. It wasn't because I wanted to become a professor. And so it really wasn't until I was in grad school. Then my first mentor was my supervisor, Dr. Pat Shaw-Fraser, a woman who went through a lot. And so I absolutely know when you talk about, standing on the shoulders of giants, definitely she's one of them, because she went through a lot to get to where she was. And so I would say it started then. So she's definitely a mentor, but before that, I think it was just, I don't know. There's not one thing. I think it's just circumstances and seeing, what, people that had management jobs, had their masters, that sort of thing. So it's not a very interesting story, but that's pretty much, I think, how I explain it.
I think for the group today, knowing about the decision point that you had to make about even pursuing a master's, I just wanted more knowledge, and you certainly wouldn't be considered overqualified or closing too many doors by doing the master's, right?
Oh, no. And in fact,
straightforward thing. If you can, you do that, and you could, and that sort of matches my experience too.
Yeah. And in fact, because most of my graduate students are master's students who just want to do their master's. And I really feel I'm just fortunate that I have a lot of research partners, a lot of connections with the environmental sector. And so all of my students have had opportunities to connect that way, because they're terminal degrees. They do not want to pursue their PhD. And that's great, because I think a master's degree is actually a very useful tool for getting some specialized skills, particularly when it comes to like data analysis and just being a little bit more. I really think it's an excellent jumping point into a career, especially when, with a science background. It's a nice kind of way to kind of end your career with a master's, for sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. We have another one in the chat here from Omar Sheikh. If you could go back, what would you have done differently?
That's
a tough one.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's true. It's because, it's one of those things. I didn't know a lot. I was a first gen student, and I look back and I think, had I known in undergrad, for example, had I known what the path was, what was required to become a researcher, and especially when it came to like getting scholarships and all that, knew none of that. I still managed to get to where I am. I think, there's some luck involved, a new university hiring that's, getting hired as a professor in Canada it can be quite competitive, because, openings don't happen that often, just being kind of transparent about that. So I wonder, had I been kind of more knowledgeable about how the system worked, would I have ended up where I ended up? And but I have no regrets, because I honestly think that sometimes the challenging bits are where you learn the most. I know that's probably cheesy too, but it's so true. And so that would maybe be it. But again, it's all hypothetical, right?
Okay, and one last one for today. Any final words of wisdom for all of our student researchers here?
So final words of wisdom, I would say, so you are all NSERC USRA awardees. I know USRA award is in that acronym, but really that's to me, it's a major milestone. It shows, there's academic excellence there. There's great potential. But at the same time, don't feel you're locked in. I think absolutely, if you want to get into research, well, it's this experience you got this summer is a wonderful stepping stone into research, for sure. I know that some students are really keen on going to medical school. I think having research experience is something that makes you competitive, so that's great too. But I guess I just want you to think that you're not locked in, that the world is your oyster, and that any learning is cross-transferable to other career goals. So I just don't want you thinking like, oh, why did I waste my time with that degree or doing that summer project when I really want to do this? It's like, no, it's all learning, and you don't, maybe you don't realize it, but it all kind of fills up your knowledge base, and that's never a waste of time.
Thank you. So on behalf of everyone in attendance today, we'd like to thank you again, Dr. Kirkwood, for giving us this fantastic inspirational address and the informative Q&A that followed. So just one final virtual round of applause, please, for Dr. Kirkwood.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Up, without further ado, we have the presentation of our certificates. We'll just thank you. This year, we had 7 esteemed recipients of the STAR Award across all faculties and 30 recipients of the NSERC USRA. So again, please celebrate with me throughout. Give us that virtual round of applause or those celebratory fireworks by pressing that reaction button on the bottom of your Zoom screen as we celebrate these award certificates. So our STAR recipients are up first. We have Aaliyah Raymond, Exploring Mental Health in the Digital Age. We have Alana Veach, Identifying Research Priorities in Respiratory Theory. We have Carmel Gonza, Coordinated Control of Unmanned Ground Vehicles and Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Systems. Meg Booth, Better Understanding When and Why People Empathize. Naida Thania, Guided Data Quality Rules Discovery via Machine Learning. Raheem Nusrat, Urban Systems Monitoring. Vitharshan Thejantharan, Academic and Professional Motivators of Undergraduate Business Students in Relation to Sustainable Development Goals. And next up, we have our NSERC recipients. Abhi Patel, Evaluation of Controller Performance on Quadcopter Flight. Camille Belair, Characterizing Aquatic Ecosystems with Satellite Imagery. Cole Lamoth, Development and Testing of External Heat Engines. Colin Elliott, Rheological Characterization of Forensically Relevant Biological Materials. Cora McFarlane, Machine Learning Techniques for Medical Image Processing. Damon Lindori Hoffman, Manufacturing and Characterization of New Biocomposites for Bone Tissue Scaffolds Produced by Additive Manufacturing. Danny Callahan, Exploring the Interaction Between Cognitive and Muscle Fatigue on Physical Performance. Emmanuel Petit, Evaluation of Controller Performance on Quadcopter Flight. Fraser Mann, Design and Development of Multi-Material 3D Printing System. Huzaifa Zia, Design and Development of Multi-Material 3D Printing System. Isaac Taylor, Virtual Materiality, Advancing Art with Simulation. Jennifer Nichols, Characterization of Cis Loop Receptor Family from Dirofilaria immitis, sorry. Kara Woodworth, Automating Software Development Using AI. Kevin Corey, Graph Centrality Measures and Disease Spread in a Network. Kevin Sawatsky, Online Performance Monitoring of the Instrumentation and Control Systems in Small Modular Reactors. Long Li, Aerodynamic Devices that Minimize Soiling of Road Vehicles. Mark Tsai, Specifics of Thermophysical Properties and Heat Transfer at Supercritical Pressures. Mitchell Ng, Characterization of Proteins that Regulate Bacterial Cellulose Biosynthesis. Nanran Hui, Design and Test of Advanced Wireless Components. Amar Sheikh, Coordinated Control of Unmanned Ground Vehicles and Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Systems. Peter Molino, Catalyst support interactions for novel fuel cell catalysts. Philippe Shirtliff, finite element analysis of machining additive manufactured metals. Samuel Lovett, sensor fusion for hybrid simultaneous localization and mapping for structural firefighters. Stevie Sansalone, exploring artificial intelligence for automated playtesting. Taha Ali, manufacturing and characterization of new biocomposites for bone tissue scaffolds produced by additive manufacturing. Tarek Abu Shakra, development and testing of external heat engines. Senegajon Sangarapillay, evaluation of intrusion detection systems for drones. Thomas DeLugus, monitoring viral SARS-CoV-S from wastewater from the Durham region. Valeria Senka, machine learning for outage scheduling and continuous monitoring. And Vidhu Sabanathan, assessment of septic system pollution in the Kawartha Lakes. So your passion and your drive for research has made Ontario Tech the leading university that is today, and we hope to see you participate in future research initiatives for the years to come. I'd now like to call on Les Jacobs to address all of you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this important ceremony, and it's always incredible to see this many people turn out on an August afternoon. Let me begin by congratulating our 37 award recipients. It's a terrific achievement. As Professor Kirkwood alluded to, it's an experience that's incredibly valuable in itself. It's a real learning experience. I suspect that every faculty member on this call was involved in some kind of research experience as an undergraduate, and if not in the early graduate years, it really shaped what they think. And for many people, it opened up multiple pathways. As some people, as Professor Kirkwood's emphasized, the pathways are so diverse, but it really gets at what the core or a core mission of the university is. So often the focus of what universities do is on delivering courses and in-class experiences. And the other core part of what a university does is as a research institution. And at Ontario Tech, we strive on providing opportunities. Arguably, we like to say that we provide more and better opportunities to our undergraduates than the other research-intensive university in the country. It's really a central commitment of the university, and these award recipients are one facet of that. But of course, there are many other ways in which our undergraduate students participate in research in the university. As an experienced researcher myself, I love to attend these, in part because as I hear the topics being announced, I think that there are great pulse on what is up and coming and what's exciting in new research in the university and more broadly. The innovation that's going on, the emphasis in so many of the research projects, not only on lab research, but sort of lab to market or lab to community research. The last one, for example, about water quality in Kawartha Lakes is a terrific example of the kind of impactful research that we're doing. That's not communities better. And whereas many of the others are clearly valuable for economic development and other purposes. So it's a wonderful sort of vignette on the research profiles. The next point that I would like to highlight is that as all of the undergraduates who are receiving the awards know, they're matched with the faculty member who has made a major commitment and is serving both as a mentor and for these research projects. That's invaluable contribution to the education of these individual students and an invaluable contribution to the university mission. And sometimes it's not fully acknowledged or is off people's radar, again, because often we focus on faculty members teaching in courses, but that teaching, that sort of one-on-one supervision of research projects is so fundamental and really important, and again, something that our faculty at Ontario Tech strive for. The last point that I would make to end my comments is to acknowledge that most of you realize that these events don't happen without months and months to pull this all together, and so kudos to her for having a successful event, and we really appreciate her, and I'm sure that all of the faculty members and the award recipients as well have had some contact with her and appreciate what she does in the background for us. So that's my final comment, and I think that hopefully many of you were inspired by Professor Good's talk, and I encourage you, whatever your future pathways are, to continue to engage in research at Ontario Tech, whether as a student, as an alumni. We really value that interaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Les, our Vice President, Research and Innovation there, for those comments. So on behalf of the Office of the VPRI and the Office of Research Services at Ontario Tech, I'd just like to say one final congratulations to the recipients of the 2021 Undergraduate Research Awards. We're so very proud of what you've accomplished these last few months, and we encourage you to stay tuned this fall for the release of the 2022 program details. Thank you all so much for attending today's virtual celebration. Thank you again to our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Andrea Kirkwood, our project supervisors, all of our faculty members, and other honored guests here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you all and to celebrate undergraduate research here at Ontario Tech. So thank you all so very much. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.